Good day, and welcome to the Social Work Job Seekers What's Changed conference call. Today's conference is being recorded. At this time, I would like to turn the conference over to Ms. Judy Cooper. Please go ahead, ma'am.
Good morning, and welcome to this community care webinar, which is revealing the findings of some exclusive research we've commissioned on social work job seekers and some of the trends that are emerging in the sector. I'm sorry we're starting a bit later than we had expected today. We've just experienced a few technical issues, but very glad to see so many of you joining us on this webinar. I'm Judy Cooper. I'm the editor of Community Care, and I'm joined this morning by Pete Clark, our head of recruitment for community care jobs.
Good afternoon, everyone.
I will be presenting the research, and Pete will help answer questions and facilitate debate at the end and as we go along. Over the next hour, we'll be discussing what are the factors that tempt a social worker to apply for a new job, what do social workers want from their jobs and careers, and what's changed over the past 2 years amongst this sector. Before I start, let me just go through a little housekeeping on how the webinar is going to work and how you can interact with us. Because of the size of the audience, you're in listen-only mode, so that means you can hear us, but we cannot hear you, I'm afraid. However, we're very keen to address any questions or comments you have throughout the session, so please use the chat pane on the bottom left-hand of your screen to submit these as we go along. Any questions you submit will be private and confidential during the webinar. If it is something of a sensitive nature that you would rather not open up to general debate, then let us know, and we'll answer you either as a private chat during the webinar, or we'll follow up with an email or a phone call after the webinar. For all other questions, unless there is something particularly pressing, we are going to leave them all till the end of the presentation. We do only have an hour this afternoon, so if there are a large number of questions, we will try and pick those that cover a good spread of the issues that have been raised, just in case we don't manage to get through all of them. If you are having any technical problems, then do also use your chat pane to submit those, and our colleagues at ReadyTalk will respond to you and try and sort them out as quickly as possible. As already mentioned, we are recording the webinar. We'll circulate a copy of the recording and the PowerPoint slides within the next week to all of you, and also to those who have registered but have not been able to join us this afternoon. We are presenting just some of the headline findings in the webinar today, so if you're interested in seeing the more detailed results and analysis of the research, let us know. We can send you a copy of a white paper we've produced of the findings. And we'll leave our contact details on the slide at the end so you can see those. So now, because you can only see the PowerPoint slides, I thought it's always nice to put a face to the name, or the voice in this case. So here are a couple of mugshots of Pete and I. I look a bit older and tireder because I've had young children. Pete has a beard, but otherwise it's still pretty accurate. So first of all, I'd like to go through some of the reasons we decided to do this research in the first place. Firstly, it fits with a new direction that community care is taking, which is about looking at the news and the analysis that you can't get anywhere else, but is vital to do your job and is vital information for the sector. And as part of that, we're examining all those areas where there isn't a great deal of research or intelligence. And social work job seekers seem to fit into this category. Pete, I think I'm right in saying that it was often felt most keenly among the people or the clients you'd be speaking to who were trying to recruit experienced social workers in particular.
Yeah, certainly just conducting some phone calls with some of our key local authorities and care providers. The big shortfall and the big challenge, a lot of them were saying, were in qualified, experienced social workers rather than the newly qualified.
Brilliant. So that's why we started our first job seekers research in 2014. And we felt that it resulted in some really important data and intelligence within the sector. So some of you might have seen that research that came out in 2014. But we knew that intelligence would be twice as useful if we began to do it on a regular basis, so we could try and build up our knowledge and our understanding and start to monitor some of the emerging patterns and changes that are happening. So this is our second batch of research, and it has revealed some really interesting findings about what has changed over the past 2 years. The research consisted of a survey, so it was sent out to both job seekers and general readers of communitycare.co.uk. It was undertaken by RBI Insight. They are research specialists, so it ensured that even though it was a survey, surveys often have sort of criticisms around being self-selecting and that kind of thing, we tried to make sure that the questions we asked delivered, sort of really unbiased and robust results, research results there. So we had 1,351 respondents, which is a decent sample size, particularly since, as you can see, we ran it over the summer holidays, for various reasons, I'm afraid. So moving on to the next slide. So about the people who responded, so the vast majority, as you can see, were local authority, working in local authority. So I think, as you would probably expect from this audience, the average age was 47 years. So we're looking at, reasonably sort of experienced older group here. 81% were women. This is sort of fits with a lot of surveys that we've done recently and that kind of response rate. 68% were social workers or senior social workers. 16% were managers. So we're looking at, again, a very experienced response rate here. And while we had sort of slightly more who work with children and families, there was a reasonable spread across the two main sectors of or areas of social work here. So moving on to the sort of one of the key findings here to come out of this demographic is that the majority, or 2/3 of them, were what we would call passive or potential job seekers. So as you can see, 3/4 are open to the idea of a new job. Only 26% are, very secure, feel very happy in their jobs. They don't want to move. So this is a big proportion of the respondents who are looking or could be tempted to look for a new job. But only 10% are actively looking for jobs. So the rest of them need to be tempted. And I think this is very valuable intelligence, because we know that this is a group that recruiters often want to focus on, as Pete was saying, around the sort of experienced social workers, and yet it's probably the group we know the least about. So this is quite interesting to come through from these findings. Certainly, employers have to work much harder to attract this group of people. I think it's worth thinking about the different ways you can do this. So you can see there that while 71% of respondents would consider applying for a job via a mobile phone or a tablet device, only 14% have actually done so. I know in some of the comments that we had on this question, those who had actually done so, particularly when you're getting to very senior levels, so sort of head of department level, said it becomes more difficult the more experience you have, the more effort you have to put into it. I think I'm right in saying, Pete, that this is probably particular to this sector, that often government or council job application forms are not the most mobile-friendly processes.
No, they're not, and even in the private sector, they've had to sort of make the whole process a lot slicker, and organisations that were able to do it and take away a lot of the hard work in completing an application form saw huge success rates in their number of people finishing off an application. I appreciate in the public sector it can be more challenging, because there's probably certain things that local authorities and organisations need to find out about a particular candidate. But my advice would be, and the evidence is there, is to try and cut out a lot of the jargon where possible.
Absolutely. I think it's definitely worth thinking about if there are ways you can do this. I mean, my husband is a classic passive job seeker, and he refuses to fill in application forms. He'll ring somebody up and say, can I just have a quick chat so you can see if I would be suitable, or can I just send you an email with my CV? I think that's very classic kind of passive job seeking behaviour, and something that probably needs to be thought a bit more about in this sector. So moving on, so if we're thinking about having to tempt passive or potential job seekers, what is it that actually tempts them? So I think this is a really interesting slide. You can see what were the top 5 factors or temptation factors in 2014 compared to 2016. And as you can see, the top factor remains a better work-life balance. I don't think this is unique to social workers. I think this is something we're seeing across all workforces. Generally, all of us are having to juggle more with things like children or caring for elderly relatives, perhaps. Our jobs have become more demanding. So work-life balance is a prime issue for modern workers generally. But when you start to look at some of the factors below that, I think it's a really interesting indicator of what's going on in social work. You can see in 2014, the second most tempting factor was better pay. I mean, again, that is something you might expect across all workforces, but you can see in 2016 that has dropped down to number 4. So still an important factor, but it is decreasing in importance, and it's being overtaken by less stress. They're looking for less stress in their life, less stress in a job that might promise them kind of maybe fewer hours, or that they don't have to work so late into the night, less caseloads, for example. They're also looking for an organization with a good reputation. Now, this is really interesting. This in 2014, this ranked as number 10, and so it's really shot up in importance for social workers. I think it's fair to say that we probably need more research in this area. We don't really know what this means to social workers, an organization with a good reputation. Does it mean that someone's had a good Ofsted report? Does it mean they're perhaps one of the DFE's partners in practice? Are they listed in sort of some of those commercial lists around good employers? Or does it mean that they've heard that they're a good employer of social workers? Now, I'm thinking of recent stories we've done on community care around West Berkshire that offer sabbaticals for social workers. I'm sure that's sort of very appealing. So is that what they're looking for? They're looking for this is an organisation that cares for its social workers, that is offering something different. So I think that's an area we'd like to do a bit more investigation. Certainly like to sort of open that up to debate at the end as well. So you're seeing pay does come up there. It's still important, but number 5, lower caseloads and dissatisfaction with current posts are also sort of big temptation factors, and they've now overtaken better career development opportunities. I think that's a really interesting shift in that, what you would traditionally think as one of the core reasons anybody shifts a job is to sort of go for a new challenge or to get new skills, and actually they're looking for things that are going to decrease the stress in their life. So I think this is a really interesting slide. I think it's showing up that there are some interesting and different behaviours among social work job seekers that we're not seeing before. I have to say that I know social workers who will often sort of go on social media, and they'll contact social workers that they know work in a certain organisation and ask them what it's like to work there. So again, social workers, those passive potential job seekers, are looking at different ways to obtain this information as well, how they make those decisions. And it's interesting thinking about caseloads. I mean, caseloads have been in the news recently. The DFE has put the average caseload per social worker at 16. I have to say this is a figure which has been met with vast incredulity by many of those who read community care. And in fact, we've done some other research with Unison, due to be published in a couple of weeks actually, so you're getting an exclusive sneak peek. But that actually shows the average caseload is now around 20. And it wasn't so long ago that caseloads were up around the 25 mark. So caseloads are actually coming down. But what this other research is showing is that senior and more experienced social workers tend to be carrying the heavier caseloads. And that also each case seems to be getting more complicated and causing an increase in emotional distress. This research we've done with Unison showed that on a single day, 80% of respondents reported that they'd experienced emotional distress during the day. So that's an enormously high figure. It matches with some other research we've done on burnout, which showed social workers were experiencing very high levels of emotional exhaustion. So caseloads are a complicated issue, and we've got some audience participation coming up here now. We've got a poll there, and we just thought it would be interesting for you to be thinking about caseloads in your area and what level they're sitting at. And also just to make sure that you've got something to do while you're listening to us. We're going to keep the poll open for about 30 seconds. Once we move on to the next slide, that poll will close. If you're having any technical issues, then do use the chat pane and just check with us. I'm sure we can work that out. You can see we've put we've been a bit more realistic than the DFE around the average caseload. We put it as 16 to 20. Right. So shall we move on? So as you can see, most have more than 16, so or more than 20. Sorry, so most have more than 20. So So that's interesting to note, actually, that it's worth thinking about what your organisation is doing to try and get those caseloads down. That's a really live issue. So that's an interesting result. Thank you for that. Thank you for taking part. I think that the next slide sort of starts to explain perhaps that previous slide around sort of what's causing those shifts in the temptation factors. So we're seeing that less than half, 46% now, feel proud of being a social worker, and that's come down from 50% in 2014. 96% feel that there is more day-to-day pressure on social workers than ever before. That was 94% in 2014. So it's not big shifts, but concerning that those numbers are increasing. And only 20% believe their working lives have improved since 2009. So I think this is really interesting, given that we've had kind of a very long and extended period of government focus on social work reform. We had the Laming reviews, we had the Social Work Reform Board, we had the Munro Review of Child Protection. More recently, we've had the Chief Social Workers focus on reform, and yet none of that seems to be being felt at the front line. Frontline social workers don't feel that their working lives are getting easier or better. And I think it's probably interesting to look at or to have a think about what are the reasons for that, because one of our theories is around that actually things are improving, but they're just not improving quickly enough. They're not able to keep pace with some of the budget cuts that councils are experiencing and that are really sort of causing some of that pressure. Because you can see the management of social workers is improving. These are figures that are on the up. 62% say they are well managed. This is up from 56%. 61% say they get the appropriate level of support, up from 56%. 68% of newly qualified social workers feel well supported by their more experienced colleagues. This is up from 65%. So it does feel like there are improvements. Even the fact that caseloads have come down, management is improving, but it doesn't seem to be moving quickly enough. Possibly, our theory here is that the level of budget cuts that councils are experiencing has caused the amount of need to go up, caused the amount of cases to go up that social workers are having to deal, and are probably causing sort of more complications within those cases. You no longer have the sort of support services that you can refer clients onto or refer service users onto. You're having to try and work out how to improve things for them with less of the tools that you used to have. So this sort of leads on to, I guess, some of the ways that social workers then try to improve their work-life balance themselves around the eternal debate in social work. Do I go permanent or do I become an agency social worker? In the past, it's always been seen that agency social work sort of pays quite a lot more, and that would be the obvious reason that somebody would shift. But we're seeing here that even, we're seeing more people are preferring to work as a locum, and I doubt that there's any doubt that pay probably does have a big impact on that. But you can see from some of the comments there that it's not the only reason, that actually it's also about flexibility. It's about perhaps working in a number of different local authorities so they can find out which is the local authority they might actually want to take a permanent post with. It's about having more control over it. If they don't like where they are, if they don't like the stress that they're under, that they can move on quite quickly. So I think we're seeing here a split between how people feel, what people feel improves their work-life balance. Because the majority still would prefer a permanent role. A permanent role offers them the security. They like building those sort of supportive longer-term relationships with service users. What's good for service users is usually good for the social worker as well. They like building those long-term relationships. They know that it improves outcomes. And they like feeling part of a proper team. Certainly if you're experiencing those very high levels of emotional distress, you want to know that you've got a supportive team that you can come in and who will help you through it. So I think what we're seeing here is a concerning shift. It's not a big shift, but it's a concerning shift that people are starting to see agency social work as a way of helping them improve that work-life balance. It's not just about the pay anymore. And I think that's probably worth thinking about if you're an employer who is trying to convince your agency social workers to become permanent. You need to be thinking sort of perhaps a bit more creatively about what are some of the reasons that they are working agency in the first place. So here we have another poll, just to keep you on your toes. So would you like to decrease your reliance on agency staff? So, you know, we know that certainly the recent agency figures from the Department for Education were showing that there is still a high reliance on agency staff, particularly to fill backlogs, and when they're getting sort of just too many cases, they're just getting overwhelmed. They're getting in teams of social workers in some cases to try and shift those backlogs. So the reliance on agency staff seems to be increasing, but is sometimes that can be a good strategy. So we will close the poll now, and let's see. Yes, a resounding yes there. So I think that shows that's pretty clear that that actually permanency brings sort of a lot of benefits for an organization, as well as for social workers themselves, and as well as for service users themselves. So that's interesting, because I was wondering if there might be a shift around some of the strategies to deal with these rising caseloads. You know, is the use of agency staff something that you would like to do? But it appears that you'd still like more permanent staff, which is interesting. So if we move on to career choices, so we're looking at sorry, let me just get my place. So we're looking at career choices. So this is another interesting debate in social work around, very much linked to the debate around social work education, in that social workers have always worked in they've always taken a generic degree and then moved into different specialisms and been able to move across different specialisms at various parts of their career if they wished to. So they could move, say, from adults or into children's if they wanted to, or into mental health. And you're still seeing that is the majority preference, but it is decreasing. So that's gone down from 61% in 2014 to 58%, so only just above half. So we're seeing more people who would like to concentrate on a single specialism. And you know, that could be the result that we've had some graduate programs coming in now that do tend to focus very much on a specialism, things like Frontline and Think Ahead and Step Up to Social Work. So we're perhaps seeing the impact of more of those coming into the workplace. But what I think is the most interesting slide, or the most interesting figure on this slide, is that more social workers want to progress their career without having to go into management. So this is quite a big jump over the 2 years, from 36% in 2014 to 47% in 2016. So you're seeing more and more social workers who they no longer like that, what might be a very traditional kind of hierarchy that we've seen, particularly in councils, where you've gone from frontline social worker to senior social worker to suddenly you have to become a manager. And we're seeing that they don't want to do that. I mean, one of the reasons that they go into this job is the direct contact with service users. That's one of the reasons that makes them want to stay in social work. Again, that research I was talking about with Unison was really showing that this is what makes them keep going despite all the pressures and despite all the challenges. It's the direct contact. It's being able to see where they've been able to make a difference, where they've been able to make someone's life better. They've been able to help someone turn their life around and do things that make them more empowered. So they don't want to lose that. They still want to progress their career. They want to be able to still stay with service users and dealing with service users. So I think it's worth thinking about what kind of career opportunities you're offering people who might be in this position. You know, there are lots of different options that are starting to come through. You can offer people, you know, there's certain councils who are making advanced practitioners in place, or obviously the principal social worker role that has been created, consultant social workers. You're seeing better links with universities now, so doing some work or giving some lectures in the university, perhaps doing some research in a specialist area. you're starting to see some sort of specialist areas as well. I know one council that has made things like child sexual exploitation as a specialist role. So people who go off and they do all the research and the reading around just that particular area, and they're then called in as consultants on any CSE case. So there are lots of different options that are becoming available, and I think it's showing that, you know, particularly amongst these passive potential job seekers, that's important to them. They want to know, what are you offering in this area? So that then leads us on to, if they have been tempted to look, what is it that they want to see in the job advertisement? What are the top 5 things that people want to see in job ads? And 82% still want to see salary. So even though it's dropped down a little bit in importance, they still want to know what the salary is. I certainly probably even just to feel that they're not going to be working for less. They also want to know what the location, where the location of the job is. But I think this is interesting. 71% want details of management approach, supervision arrangements, and organizational culture. So again, we're seeing this shift that they don't just want to know about the job, they want to know about the employer. They want to know who is it that they're going to be working for. They want to know about the organization. I think that's a really interesting shift. They want to know information about the team they would be working with. They want to know, okay, am I going to feel at home here? Am I going to feel that these people are going to be supporting me when I'm suffering emotional distress as part of this job? And of course, how big a caseload they can expect. You know, caseloads is the big theme here. They worry about it. They want less stress. They want to know whether they're going to have a decent caseload size or not. So again, because caseloads have come up so regularly, we're moving on to. So we're looking at another poll, which is, are you satisfied if your job descriptions and advertising campaigns are the most effective they can be? So just thinking about some of those ideas that people want to see in their job advertisements, are you delivering that information to people? Have you thought about it? So we'll keep that going now, and we'll close that now.
Part of the reason this has come up, Judy, is that speaking to a number of our advertisers that are looking to attract qualified social workers, where we're seeing poor application and poor response rates. When we look at a lot of the copy for the advertising, and when I show it to some of your team members that work in the content team that obviously know perhaps the right language to use when engaging with our audience, we've looked at a number of campaigns where we've rewritten some of the ad copy, and we've seen real successes in their application rates going up just from tweaking some of the language used and some of the content that they put in it. So I'm just, you know, it'll be interesting to see from our listeners today whether they're satisfied that their ad copy, their job descriptions are the best they can be.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because we can see now that that the majority are saying no there. And what about the commercial sector, Pete? Because I know, do they do this better? I know you've worked on the RADs, which is billed as the social work Oscars for the recruitment industry. So you must have seen some interesting practice there. You know, do they do this better than sort of the public sector?
Well, yeah. Well, generally in job descriptions, less is more. So if you can be very brief and very to the point, you know, that tends to see better application rates. Using creative images more than heavy text in your branding campaigns or your creative always seems to be more successful. Having a very, very honest approach and less jargon, like I've already mentioned. Yeah, so that's absolutely.
Interesting. Okay. So then if we move on to thinking about social work job interviews, so we asked people what are the top 5 questions social workers want answered about any new job. I think probably unsurprising, how far is it from my home? I think everyone wants to know what their commute's going to be like, don't they? So I don't think that's a surprise. Can I work from home on occasion? Again, caseloads coming up. Will I have lower caseloads? Do I have my own desk? So this is probably a more social work specific factor here. hot desking is very unpopular. Whenever we've talked to social workers, it seems to be very unpopular with them. Many people like Eileen Munro have come out against it, saying that it doesn't work for social work. And I think it's worth thinking about the reasons why that is. So I know some councils have just said, well, we've implemented hot desking across all our workforces. We can't just single out social workers. But I think perhaps you should be thinking, should you be singling out social workers, because they are doing perhaps a very different job to other people working within a council or within an organisation. Like I say, they're dealing with high levels of emotional distress in their job. If you're coming in and you're then having to search for a desk, you're not quite sure who you might be sitting next to. You're trying to hold it together. You're just about to burst into tears. That's just going to add to the levels of stress that people are experiencing and that they want to reduce. So I think it's worth thinking about here, not just they have to just deal with it, but thinking about why is it that they don't like it, and how might that be increasing their stress levels on top of an already stressful job. And 37% is flexible working considered. So again, looking at ways that they can increase their work-life balance, get some more control over that. So moving on to some sort of key conclusions here. I think probably the first one is around sort of swift and easy application methods and processes, recruitment processes that will appeal to passive job seekers, sort of ensuring that HR departments are really attuned to what is it about social workers that's unique, and are we doing enough to attract the right people in this particular sector. There's a key thing here about building your reputation among social workers, particularly if you're trying to target those passive job seekers. This is something that you can start to be doing more of. Provide as many details as you can about flexible working, pay, conditions, caseloads, where they're going to be working, are they going to be working from home. These are things that are important to them. The more they know, the more they might be engaged, the more they might be tempted to apply for a job. Be clear about not just sort of to the job seeker, but within your organisation yourself about how you're supporting the work-life balance and the stressful nature of social work as a job in itself. Are you attuned to this? Are you taking that into account? And some more creative thinking around career structures. For those who don't wish to go into management, what have you got to offer people in that area? Have you got enough? Is there more you could be doing? Could you be thinking a bit more creatively around this? So that's just a taster. We obviously have more sort of in-depth analysis, more conclusions in the full report. So I'll leave those contact details up on the slide there. So if you would like the report, then do get in touch. I think there's some sort of really interesting reading there. We've now got a little bit of time for questions, so we're going to move on to our Q&A session. And Pete's been having a look at some of the questions coming in.
I have, and I thought I've just had a look at, just so you can get your breath back, Judy, and maybe have a drink of water. I thought I'd pick up on ones that would maybe relevant for me and that I would be able to answer. So
Brilliant. If
I kick off, actually there's a couple of people that have been asking around. You mentioned that 74% are open to the idea of a new job. What is the best way to target these potential job seekers? So my advice would be, obviously, many organisations that are probably listening in are still very reliant on job sites, which is, of course, good for the active job seeker, and I would recommend it should always still play a part in any recruitment campaign, but it probably doesn't offer the opportunity to target those that are not actively searching for a job. So probably many of the organisations wanting to recruit would like the idea of attracting, putting their jobs in front of people not necessarily searching for a job. So the most successful campaigns, certainly that we run on community care for our clients, will be around advertising on the content site, so engaging with our passive audience that are going to the site for news and content. As well as we have a really engaged social audience of around 40,000 now likes on Facebook, and we're always getting comments and likes and shares. We've seen some really successful recruitment campaigns utilising that audience. Our Twitter audience is very high as well and engaged of 44,000. So we've seen really good success there. We are just about to launch the Employer Zone, which offers organisations the opportunity to promote themselves as an employer of choice. We've already mentioned about brand reputation. Potential job seekers know good organisations and perhaps not so good ones. So the Employer Zone offers employers the opportunity to promote through engaging content and bespoke messaging. Our content team will work with you to identify some of the key points that you're doing well in your organisation so we can focus on that. Another opportunity would be to attend one of our CC Live events. Face-to-face works really well in recruitment and attraction. Our next one is in Manchester on April the 25th and 26th. London on 26th, 27th of September. We have a huge number of qualified social workers, so a really good opportunity for exhibitors to promote themselves there and actually meet potential job seekers. And many of the exhibitors there, as we know, are there to recruit qualified social workers as well as offering their services and whatnot. So that's perhaps some advice around the best way to target those potential job seekers. I've got another question here, Judy. I think you might be good to answer this. A lot of people kind of saying it's obviously challenging to recruit these qualified social workers, but in my organisation, it's also a real challenge to keep them there, to retain them. Have you any advice on how best we can do this?
Yes, well that's very interesting because that is actually another area that we're doing some more research in. We took a look and we could see that there wasn't actually, although there's a bit of research around social worker retention, it didn't feel very coherent. It didn't feel like there was much you could do with it, sort of practical advice. So we have actually commissioned the University of West England to work with us to sort of review all the research, not just in the UK but internationally, around the retention of social workers, what works and what doesn't. And we're coming up with what we'd like to do is try and turn that into a retention risk tool. So to be able to look at what are the factors that are most important, that you should be focusing the most on. What are the most important when you're trying to retain social workers? So that research is going on at the moment. We're sort of not ready really to get any of those emerging findings yet, but I guess it's a case of watch this space. We're hoping in a few months that we'll have some more to report around that.
Yeah, I've just picked up a question regarding, this is aimed at myself, so as an experienced but older social worker, my work-life balance is key. So how can I secure part-time work? Agencies do not seem to offer or permanent posts. I will pick that up separately with this person because there will be people to speak to that specialise in part-time roles. So I will pick that up separately. Another couple of questions that are coming in around what advice can you give around what would be a successful recruitment campaign? What would it look like? And obviously now we've got a more understanding into what would motivate a person to change jobs in this sector. It's important to look at what your organisation can offer these potential job seekers. So some of the content, we've mentioned this already, from some of the job descriptions just will not deliver the correct response, and they haven't. And obviously working with our content team and our advertisers, we've been able to kind of re-look at how they're communicating to this audience to generate a better application rate. Focus on what you do well. I think every person recruiting for in this sector will know the positives of why you would want to work here. So really bring that out and highlight that in your job descriptions. We've already mentioned, we know that caseloads are a real pull. If you're below the national average, make that a big highlight, make that the lead of your campaign. We also know that work-life balance is a really important thing. So anything that you do well around the low caseloads, good work-life balance, make that the lead of your headline, and you will see applications increase. Avoid too much jargon. We've mentioned this where possible, and make the application process very slick and easy. Where you have sectors with skills shortages, like we have in this sector, organisations have to work harder to sell themselves. Brand reputation, what are you doing to attract that passive job seeker? And this needs to be highlighted as much as possible.
Yeah.
We've mentioned try and make resource available. I know this is difficult for a lot of listeners, but potential job seekers like to ask questions around people already doing the job.
Yep.
So if you can release resource, someone who's actively doing that job, and a potential candidate could speak to them to say, tell me about your caseloads, tell me about your management support, is it working? You know, have an ambassador within your organisation to talk about what the day-to-day job is like. It's all about the candidate journey. If you can make that candidate experience a good one, an easy one, you will have more success in recruiting.
Absolutely. I think case studies are always really powerful. I mean, we know that from communitycare.co.uk, that just saying, you know, if you can have a first-person account of something, it's far more powerful. It's far more emotional. People really respond to it rather than you know, a director of children's services saying, oh well, we're doing this. That's very good. So yes, that's quite key, I think. I can see there's a question here around accreditation. So what impact do you think the national assessment and accreditation of social workers will have on retention? What advice would you give employers on the best way to positively communicate this to staff? I think this is a really interesting question. I know a lot of councils are, quite frankly, a bit terrified of the impact that accreditation might have, that particularly some of the more experienced social workers who are perhaps close to retirement might just think, you know what, I can't be bothered, I'm just going to take early retirement. But if you speak to Isabel Trowler, she is convinced that it is going to solve some of the recruitment and retention issues. She is convinced that it's actually going to give a much better assessment of sort of what you do in your job, and it's going to give employers a much better appreciation of what you do in your job and what you do well. So some of this stuff might actually be hidden from some of your senior managers. When you're going out on a home visit, you know, you're often the only person on there. No one else is on there. They don't know if you do a good job or not. So some of if you speak to Isabel, she's saying this is, you know, sort of uncovering some of this. This is showing what your skills are. This is your chance to shine. So I think probably it's difficult to answer your question at the moment until it comes into play. So I think it's going to be one of those things that it's going to play out, and it could go either way. But certainly I know a lot of local authorities are concerned about it. In terms of sort of positively communicating this to staff, I think perhaps it's about, you know, social workers need to be confident in the skills that they have. They have a lot of skills, perhaps they don't feel that they do, and actually going through this process, perhaps that could give them that confidence. That could make them feel that, yes, I am good at this job. You know, something I know instinctively has now actually been shown to me in black and white, and my manager knows it, and my manager's manager knows it. So that, you know, that could be a really good and positive thing. So that's my best attempt to give you help there.
That was good, very good, Judy. Do you know why, Judy, quick question, I'm not sure I can answer this. And I think I think there's two sides to this, because I've heard that actually some organisations are looking to reduce the number of qualified and perhaps look at more support staff with the idea of training them up within their organisations. But I've had a couple of points around why do most employers give preference to experienced social workers while the newly qualified can be neglected without the opportunity and experience that can be gained. You know, do you know anything? I think
the key to that is, I think it is changing. I think it's just time and pressure. They have so many cases coming in. We've seen the number of cases in both children's social work and adult social worker continually increasing. The CARE Act and some of the deprivation of liberty changes has really increased some of the workloads on adult social workers. In children's social care, we've seen the number of cases coming into care are increasing year on year. And I think, like we were saying, because we're getting a lot of those that support services have been cut now because of budget cuts, these are more difficult cases. So every case is quite difficult and is quite complicated to deal with, and it it takes more experience and knowledge to be able to take that case to a conclusion quickly, more quickly. And actually, if you had a newly qualified social worker on it, actually you might need 2 social workers on it because they might need help sort of working through it. So I think most local authorities are purely thinking, I have this number of cases and I need as many experienced social workers as I can get in order to try and work through them. But I think, we're seeing a shift because they can't recruit them. They can't recruit those experienced social workers. And so I know lots of local authorities are doing more sort of grow your own schemes, what you were talking about with the support workers, and are starting to train them up. And I think that they're having to think a bit more creatively about basically how they sort of get newly qualified social workers to a more experienced place as quickly as they can. So I think maybe things are changing in that area, possibly.
Well, yeah, and obviously that goes into another question around what reach do we have in our support and care worker roles. And we're seeing, certainly across the job site, that our biggest search job term at the moment is support worker. So clearly we are seeing more people accessing our job content in the sort of non-qualified area, for support work, and the advice is how best to attract them. Well, again, it's a skill shortage. Lots of people are after support workers. Go back to perhaps some of what I've already mentioned around don't just rely on job postings and job site advertising, but let's look at your employer brand. Let's talk about what you're doing well, and let's try and attract people that want to move for the right reason.
And absolutely, I think also those local authorities and employers that I know of who have a very clear kind of career progression plan in place for their social workers. So starting right from support worker, being very clear about how they can progress, what they're going to do to support them onto perhaps a social work degree, and then moving from newly qualified to sort of more experienced roles. Those local authorities that you see who have those very clear career progression, it's very obvious how you can get it. They tend to attract your experienced social workers as well. I mean, all social workers are looking for what's my next step in my career ladder, and the more you can do, like we were talking about, sort of offering kind of more creative options for people who are more experienced, the more you can have a proper ladder in place and worked out, I think the better you'll recruit at all levels.
Sure, yeah, I agree with that.
So I think perhaps, I know we're a little bit late starting, but perhaps if we just take one more question. So as I'm aware, you're all very busy and places to go. So perhaps if we look at, we've got one here around examples of what employers are looking for in their applicant responses. How can applicants phrase their practice examples in their applications? I think that's quite an interesting question, really, sort of turning it around. We have focused very much on the employer trying to find it, but actually what are employers looking from applicants, and what do they want to see? And I think certainly the anecdotal evidence I have is that they want to feel confident in you as a social worker. So what can you do to give them that confidence? What examples have you got to give them that confidence? Even if perhaps you don't have a huge amount of experience, what kind of analysis can you do around sort of certain cases or cases that have been in the media, even sort of things around case law? What research have you done around that? What analysis can you provide? The experience comes from being able to look at things and being able to come up with a number of different theories and work through them. So if you can show that you've got the right attitude and the right approach to cases, I think that would also convince local or employers that they should look further at your application.
Yeah. And just another quick one. What advice would you give a newly qualified social worker who just discovered today that they are a passive job seeker? I would suggest going to communitycarejobs.co.uk and looking for your next employer.
Absolutely. And to keep reading communitycare.co.uk and finding out as much as you can about the sector and about everything that's going on. I think one of the key factors that we find about passive job seekers is that they tend to be people who proactively look for information as well to help them make some of these decisions. So, that's brilliant. and good luck. Excellent. All right. Well, I think that's all we've got time for now. So thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate you taking the time out from your very busy diaries. I hope you found it useful and interesting. Like I say, do please contact us if you would like a copy of the white paper, or if you'd like to be kept involved in terms of where we are with our retention research as well. So do please get in contact. We'd love to hear from you. Other than that, it's goodbye from Pete.
Goodbye.
Goodbye from me. And thank you very much for joining, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.
And that concludes today's presentation. Thank you for your participation, and you may now disconnect.